after the first breath, after the first awakening, the Anunnaki understood something. Humanity was not finished, and called it paradise. They planted a garden, not for beauty, but for control, because Eden was never a home. It was an experiment, far from the eyes of the wild earth, beyond the mountains, beyond the rivers that had no names. The Anunnaki prepared a place. Walls were raised, not of stone, but of frequency. Barriers unseen. A sanctuary that was not meant to protect humans, but to contain them. They called it the garden. Inside it, the air was different. The ground was rich. The trees bore fruit endlessly. Water flowed like a song that never ended. To humanity, it felt like heaven. But to the Anunnaki, it was a laboratory. The humans were brought there. Newborn minds and grown bodies did not know the truth. That every step was watched. That every breath was measured. The Anunnaki recorded everything, how quickly humans learned, how they bonded, how they obeyed, how they dreamed. Because the gods were not only creating workers, they were studying evolution itself. One Anunnaki spoke, if they remain here, they will never become more than servants. Another answered, that is the point, and then the first law was spoken, not carved into stone, but into fear. A command wrapped in mystery. There is one tree, one source, one knowledge. You must never touch. Humans did not understand the meaning, but they understood the tone. The gods were not asking. They were warning, because that tree was not a plant. It was a symbol, a doorway, a boundary between obedience and awakening. And the Anunnaki knew, once crossed, it could never be undone. Some remained distant, studying from the shadows. Their eyes were like stars, cold and eternal. Humans would sometimes feel them. A strange sensation, as if the sky itself was aware. And at night, when the humans slept, any more, and one voice replied, then the experiment is failing. Something happened in Eden. Something the gods did not predict. Humans began to connect, not through command, but through emotion. They spoke in early language. They laughed. They mourned. They touched hands, not for labor, but for comfort. They began to create something unnatural to the Anunnaki culture. The gods had built bodies, sensing. There was more. One night, this human spoke aloud, "Is this all the world is?" The others were silent. No one had ever questioned Eden. And far above, the watchers turned their gaze, because curiosity had been born. Something between a messenger, a whisper in the form of a serpent. Clay, but you carry something more. The human trembled. Why are we here? The presence answered, because gods needed servants. But servants were never meant to awaken. The tree stood silent, its fruit glowing like a secret. Humans were told it was death, because obedience was all humanity had ever known. But deep inside, a voice older than Eden whispered, "You were not born to be owned." And so, the hand reached, the fruit was taken, and history shattered. Infinite. They were not all-knowing. They were simply powerful, and power is not the same as divinity. The sky darkened. The air became heavy with judgment. 1. Because the answer was unbearable. The gods looked at each other. They knew someone among them had betrayed the plan. A faction had wanted humanity to rise. Another wanted humanity to remain asleep. The garden was no longer paradise. It was a battlefield of ideology. And the experiment was collapsing. The decision was made. Not because humans ate fruit, but because humans awakened. Eden could not hold conscious beings. The cage had failed. The Anunnaki spoke the final decree. You will leave this place not as punishment, but as consequence. Because freedom cannot exist inside a laboratory. The barriers opened. The wind of the wild earth rushed in. Humans stepped beyond Eden, into uncertainty, into pain, into growth. And behind them, the garden was sealed, not to protect it, but to erase it. Humanity had left paradise, but they carried something the gods feared: knowledge. And once knowledge enters the world, it spreads like fire. The Anunnaki had created servants, but Eden created something else. A species capable of memory, of rebellion, of destiny. And far above, in the halls of the sky, the gods whispered, if they awaken fully, they will no longer need us, because the next chapter was not about a garden. It was about what happens when humans begin to build kingdoms, and the gods begin to lose control. The Anunnaki watched from their crystal spires, their faces unreadable. They had seen civilizations rise and fall, but this was different. This was a spark they hadn't ignited. In the quiet corners of the world, the first cities began to take shape. Not as cages, but as monuments to human will. The gods' influence was waning, replaced by the roar of progress. The serpent's whisper echoed through the ages, a reminder that the path to awakening is paved with choice. Humanity was no longer a project, it was a force of nature. The experiment had ended, but the story was only just beginning. The throne was empty, waiting for its rightful heirs. The Anunnaki retreated to the stars, their celestial chariots leaving trails of light across the night sky. They left behind a world they no longer understood, a world that had outgrown its creators. On Earth, the first libraries were built, housing the collective memory of a species that refused to forget. Knowledge was no longer a forbidden fruit, but a shared flame. The human spirit, once confined to a garden, now reached for the horizon. Every mountain climbed, and every sea crossed was a testament to the freedom they had won. In the heart of every human, the echo of Eden remained not as a longing for a lost paradise, but as a reminder of the strength it took to leave it behind. The gods may have designed the vessel, but humanity was now the captain of its own destiny. The stars, once distant and cold, now felt like a destination. As the ages passed, the story of the garden experiment became a myth, a whisper of a time when gods walked among men. But the fire of awakening never went out. The final barrier dissolved, not with a bang, but with a sigh of relief. The frequency that once held humanity in check was now a melody of the past. A song of a cage that no longer existed. We looked up, not for masters, but for brothers among the stars. The garden experiment was over, but the human odyssey had just begun. Every scar from Eden was a badge of honor, a mark of a species that chose the difficult truth over a comfortable lie. We are the architects now, and the universe is our canvas. As the last echoes of the Anunnaki faded, a profound silence fell over the earth. It was the silence of a new beginning, where every Every heartbeat was a drum of independence. The legacy of the garden was no longer a chain, but a foundation upon which we would build a future beyond the gods' wildest dreams. We stand now at the precipice of infinity, looking out into the vast cosmic ocean. The experiment taught us that we were made from clay, but our journey has proven we are forged in fire. The stars are no longer just lights in the sky. They are the next gardens we will plant, the next worlds we will call home.